Hello, welcome to Dharma Jazz. My name is Steve. I like to help people make better music. Welcome to Dharma Jazz. If you're coming from a pop or classical background and are just beginning to explore jazz piano, even if you understand the basic meaning of a given chord symbol, the chord quality, you might not yet have gained comfort with the varieties and freedoms of expression for those chord qualities. Now, if you're already playing jazz standards and are still playing root position chords,
Aw, why?
but seriously, it's time to get out of the sandbox. This video will give you some ideas on how to voice those chord symbols in a way that's more musical, fits easier in the hand as well. Today we'll look at two chord shapes well suited for dominant chords. Two chord shapes. Before we get going, please do a couple quick clicks to like and subscribe. These simple shapes will work cleanly with piano-bass duos, solo comping situations, or when you're playing with an ensemble. When we have a bass player covering, for the most part, the roots and the rhythmic pulse, our left hand is free to flesh out chord qualities and colors. When we are a solo accompanist, that is, without a bass player, then our left hand might play some bass line ideas, and our right hand might use some of these same voicings. Having suggested that the role of the bass is to emphasize the roots and rhythmic pulse, we have to acknowledge that jazz bass playing has evolved substantially over the years. Now, back in the era of, say, Ron Carter, Ray Brown, Oscar Pettiford, Paul Chambers, lots of others, the emphasis was generally on a steady pulse, more or less over scales and arpeggios, with chord tone targets. Around the late 50s, early 60s, bassists such as Scott LaFaro, Chuck Israels, Eddie Gomez started playing in this more freely melodic style. The underlying rhythmic pulse was still present, but they began exploring a much broader creative palette, akin to a kind of spontaneous counterpoint. Then along comes Jaco Pastorius, his dramatic flamboyance, expanding the possibilities for the role of the bass by becoming a de facto co-lead instrument, on par with the other melodic instruments in small ensembles. Now, I mention this both to acknowledge the evolution of the bass's role, and because for the purpose of this video, that is exploring left-hand chord shapes, we'll be using iReal Pro tracks, and those bass and drum samples are very rudimentary. Solid, metronomic, they aren't creative, not at all interactive. I think of it as a color-enhanced metronome. We're going to use two different shapes that work to voice dominant chords with the roots C and F. This involves looking at two inversions. Remember, an inversion is when a chord tone other than the root is in the bass or on the bottom. Let's begin by identifying some chord tones that we want to keep, those we want to leave out. A dominant chord has a major third and a minor seventh. The blue arrows here indicate that. Third and seventh. In C, it's E and B flat. In F, it's A and E flat. Our two inversions today are first inversion and third inversion. Let's start with first inversions. The first inversion has the third of the chord on the bottom. After moving the root down low and removing the fifth, that's often sufficient, but to set us up for the next step, let's swap out that root in the original version using a 9-4-1 substitution. 9 in place of 1. We say 9 for 1. This gives us a shorthand for a shape, let's call it 3 flat 7 9. 3 7 9, 3 flat 7 9. Flat 7 minor 7. Where we swap the root for the ninth, and we can specify that change with the chord symbols C9 and F9. It's much less cluttered, giving the chord tone room to breathe. Next, let's move that shape up the keys, both for simple shedding and to hear what happens to the timbre. Let's start in C7. Notice it starts getting a little thin up top. If I add a bass note. It starts getting just a little thin. It loses its richness. Same if we go down too far, right? It kind of loses its clarity. A guiding principle for me in general is when the bottom note of this chord shape gets lower than around D flat, C, it starts getting a little too many. Okay? As an option then, once we get up the keyboard a bit, let's explore the other inversion in our demonstration, third inversion. So this is where the seventh of the chord is on the bottom. Here it is in C. So here's that first inversion with the E on the bottom. And then here it is with the seventh on the bottom. That's third inversion. Up here, it's already a little too thin. When we get down in this arena, this shape for our F13. F13. So what we've done here is we've gotten rid of the root again. We're going to put it down low. We're going to keep the seventh and third. And we're going to swap 6 for 5, or the 13th. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, the 13th. So in this case we had a 9 for 1 sub. In this case we have a 6 for 5. This is much juicier here. And then, as we get up the keyboard again, these voicings start to get a little thin. So, for me, when I'm comping in general, I like to keep my hand kind of in this area. It's where it seems to just sound the richest. Okay, so we're going to take that shape, move it up and down the keys. For simple shedding, hear what happens to the timbre in different registers. Now, when we observe the same chord shapes in different registers, we can use this awareness when moving from one chord to the next, particularly when those two chords are a fourth or a fifth apart, as with C9 and F13. Notice the economy of motion when I move from, say, C to F13. Retain the common chord tones, if any. Move the remaining chord tones to their nearest neighbors. This works easily in the case of C9 moving to F13. This D natural appears in C9 and in F13. So we retain the common chord tones. The tritone shape, E to B flat, moves down a half step, E flat to F, so 3-7. Bass moves a fourth, we just move a half step there, flat 7-3. C9, very slick. So let's wrap up with a quick review. We've improved the musicality of the chord shapes by using inversions, omitting the roots and fifths, retaining the functional chord tones, that's the third and the sevenths, and we've kept our breathing room while adding some additional color tones, in this case either the 9th or the 13th, using a 9 for 1 or 6 for 5 sub. Dig the economy of motion. We hardly move our hand at all, and the connectivity between the chords is actually musically pleasing. So for practice, move each one up and down about an octave, playing each in the right hand, and so on. Do the same with the 13th shape. Etc. Go up about an octave. Explore when they get either too muddy on the low end or too tinny on the right side. And then I like to do the same thing by putting my right hand on the root and the left hand on the chord shape, etc. Explore where they get either too muddy or too tinny, and just get a feel for how those shapes sound in your hand, if that makes sense. Invest a little time shedding these voicings. You'll be well on your way to playing through countless tunes, especially blues, standards with 1-chord, 4-chord combinations. Let me know how your practice with this concept goes. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. As always, until next time, happy practicing.